Well, okay. So today we are going to discuss about causation in history writing. Causation, what does that mean? Is that in a nutshell, to be very precise, understanding of history is never complete if we just narrate the event and do not try to understand the causes behind it. Like if you remember, in my earlier classes, I told you that the Britishers came to India all the way from England, thousands of miles, and then they established their hegemony over Indian subcontinent. Now, this is an historical event, but just by narrating that the Britishers came and they occupied Indian subcontinent is not enough to understand, to have a proper perspective of history. And in order to have a proper perspective of history, what we need to do is we need to understand the causes behind it. What were the reason that prompted the Britishers to sail thousands miles away and come to India? What were the causes that India, though such a hugely populated country, was occupied by the very small number of the Britishers? So the job of a historian is not only just to narrate the event, but to satisfy the curiosity, to understand the causes behind the event. And it is necessary to satisfy that curiosity. We need to search for the reason, and this is known as causation and explanation of history. So, causation, very simple, by meaning itself, we can understand that the causation implies that we are trying to search the causes behind the historical event. Now, with this causation, the historical event they become meaningful. We get a proper perspective of history, and without causation, the history writing will become just record of the event. And R.G. Collingwood, one of the very well-known historian, he compares that history without causation is like a railway timetable. You have just a information, but it won't convey the proper meaning. There is no connectivity between the events. And historical events are to be woven together by causation. What is the meaning of this woven together? That means one event becomes the cause of another event, and that event becomes a cause of further event, and then that event becomes the cause of further event. So that cycle continues. For example, Britishers came to India is a event, but the cause behind that event was one of the important cause was industrial revolution. And what was the cause behind the industrial revolution? That is a renaissance. People developed the scientific attitude. They started investigating. So we have a renaissance, development of the scientific attitude, leading to the lot of scientific development, and that further led to the industrial revolution. And that industrial revolution created the need in the European countries for the colonies which can supply the raw material as well as which can function as a market for the finished goods. And that became one of the important reason that the European countries they started searching for the colonies. So we have this cycle, the cyclic reaction. And as a consequences of that need for the colonies, that the European people came to India, and finally the Britishers they came out successful after defeating the French and other European power. So you understand that cyclical reason, and when you understand the cyclical reason, one event becoming a cause for another event, and that event becoming a cause for another event, so on and so forth, that we find that we come to know that history is an interconnected event. It's not an isolated event. Everything is having interconnectivity. So, in short, the finding the reason behind the particular event is known as causation. And the early efforts, if we try to understand who has done causation, Herodotus has done some causation to a certain extent. We will be studying about Herodotus in detail when we will be studying about Greek historiography. And while recording the conflict between the different tribes, he says that the purpose of his writing history is not only just to record the event, record the conflict, but also to explore the causes behind it. And there could be numerous episodes. For example, why India was attacked repeatedly? Because for the simple reason that India was having a fertile land. So there is a cause that why the people from Central Asia they always wanted to invade and have established their control over India. And Indian rulers generally they rarely went with their army to Central Asia. This we have already discussed long back, because for the simple reason that in comparison to India, Central Asia do not have a fertile land. So who will risk his life to invade the area which is arid? And there is a medieval historian Ibn Khaldun, Arab historian. We will be discussing about it, and he also analyzed the nature of history, and he also said that it is necessary for the historian to search for the causes behind the event. But in spite of these few historian like Herodotus and Ibn Khaldun, we generally find that causation was not given that much importance before 19th century, and it is after 19th century that the people became more conscious. History writing became more scientific, and so the causation became more important in the historical writing. Uh, Cycle cause of effect. This is over. Well, there could be number of reasons. Certain examples are given. Hitler had attacked Poland, and the Second World War started. But there were causes behind that. He wanted to establish his hegemony, so he started attacking. Started attack. Started. He attacked Poland, and that led to the Second World War. And there could be number. Obviously, there could be number of reason behind any historical event. And when you go for research, a historian is expected to understand the different reason. Well, for example, it is believed that Martin Luther King he started his reformist movement in the church in European countries, but there were a number of reasons. We just can't give all the credit to Martin Luther King. He was definitely an important persona, but nevertheless, the corruption in the church, the exploitation under the name of the religion, was the cause that created a lot of resentment among the people. And Martin Luther King came forward who represented that resentment, and finally he started his Protestant movement. And similarly, Russian Revolution of 1917, though Lenin had played a very important role, we just can't say that it was Lenin who was responsible for the revolution. There were a number of causes. There was a lot of resentment among the people, and that finally built up the atmosphere against the rule of Tsar, and finally it led to the Russian Revolution. Uh, in the While analyzing the causes, there could be a certain causes could be more important, certain causes could be less important, and that also we need to take into consideration. Uh, Carl Goetson, one of the important historian, he says, well, what are the things we should be taken into consideration when you go for causation? What is the immediate cause of the event? What was the intellectual reason behind the event? Who were the people related to the event? Do they belong to the same or different group? What were the source of strength or weakness? And what were the reaction of the different group? What were the significant changes that came after the event? All these things are to be taken into consideration. What was the geographical situation of the event? Why the particular thing has taken place in the particular geographical location? For example, why the Marathas they stood up against the imperialism of the Mughal? Because the geographical location had played an important role. It supported the guerrilla warfare. Why the Rajputs could resist the imperialism of the Delhi Sultan for a very long period. There are geographical locations. So while understanding these causes, we also need to take into consideration if that particular event has taken place into the particular geographical location. What is the reason that the Britishers could develop a very strong navy? Because it have a peculiar geographical situation. Um well, now in case of causation, there is one general mistake which is likely to happen, and that is called oversimplification. In Hindi, it is called Ati Sulabhikaran. That means there is an historical event, and we try to attribute the reason for that historical event to the one cause. For example, just going back to the earlier example, the revolt of 1857 was having a numerous causes. There was a lot of resentment among the Indian people, and Mangal Pandey have started the revolt by shooting his British officer. And if somebody says that it is a Mangal Pandey who is responsible for the revolt of 1857, or the first war of independence of 1857, that will be an oversimplification. You are ignoring the very complex situation. Similarly, going back to the earlier example of Russian Revolution, if you say that it is Lenin who was mainly responsible for the Russian Revolution, then that is again oversimplification. The Maratha Empire has become extinct, and Bajirao II was Peshwa. And if you say that Bajirao II was responsible for the downfall of the Marathas, he did had his own role, no doubt about it. But there were a lot of things that has weakened the Maratha Empire when they came in the frontal coalition with the growing British Empire. So these are the different reason. These are the different reason that we need to explore when we try to analyze the causes behind the historical event. And if you give the credit to only one person or to one singular event, then that is an oversimplification. For example, in case of Indian freedom struggle, Mahatma Gandhi gave us independence. That is a quite an oversimplification. No doubt, Mahatma Gandhi had played a very important role, but there were numerous factors that finally Britishers realized that it is better for us to leave India right now because we are no longer in a position to hold it. Well, given credit to one person, and there are a number of reasons. I have just taken a certain example. Winston Churchill, England won a Second World War, but though Winston Churchill was a very capable leader and gave very effective leadership to the people of Britain during the Second World War, but we cannot give all the credit to Winston Churchill, to the tenacity of the British citizen. Timely help that came from USA was also one of the important factors that has finally contributed to the victory of the British. Well, then there are certain historical events for which it's very difficult to find the scientific causes. So while doing causation, there is one factor that you must remember, that in certain historical event there could be a coincidence that is playing an important role. For example, if you remember, if you have studied the Mughal history, during the second battle of Panipat, Hemu, who was leading the army of Sur Sultan, he was about to win the war, about to win the battle, but suddenly an arrow comes and strike in his eye, and he becomes unconscious. And then he is removed from the battlefield, and people, his own army, they started feeling that probably our Senapati, our commander in chief, has died, and that created panic. And Akbar took advantage of it, Akbar and his regent Bairam Khan, and then they fought. And second battle of Panipat, it went in favor of Akbar finally. So this is a coincidence. An arrow suddenly coming and striking in the eye of Hemu is a coincidence. We just can't find a very scientific reason. It may happen in the war, and suddenly the table may turn. So there are certain events for which we can't find a very scientific reason, and this doctrine of coincidence is known as Cleopatra's nose, and there is a history behind it. Antony was a very capable general of Roman army, and when he attacks Egypt just before the war, he have meeting with the queen of Egypt, Cleopatra, who is known in history to be a very beautiful lady. And during that meeting, he falls for her. He was mesmerized by her beauty, and then it is said that later on, when the battle was fought, they lost the battle, and the reason is that because Antony, instead of concentrating on fighting, he was a leading general. He was thinking about Cleopatra's nose. Her nose was believed to be very beautiful, and it came to be known as the doctrine of Cleopatra's nose. What does that mean is that there could be certain coincidence. People don't believe that Antony, such a seasoned and experienced general, will think about a woman while fighting the war. He knows his responsibility. But it was just a coincidence that the Roman have lost the war, and then it is attributed to Cleopatra. It is just a fun kind of thing. The meaning of doctrine of Cleopatra's nose is that in a historical causation, in a historical analysis, there could be certain event for which we don't find any scientific cause. It could be just a coincidence. Mm. So lastly, we'll sum up. Causation is very important in understanding history. There is a cyclic relation and interconnectivity between the causes. While doing causes, one of the mistake that we can make is oversimplification, and then there is something called coincidence in history, for which we really don't find a very scientific reason. Certain events can happen, certain event can take place, just we don't really know the scientific reason behind it. So this was again very small topic. In the next class also we will be having a very small topic, that is footnote and bibliography, how to give footnote and bibliography in your research. We will finish that and 2 units will be over, and next after that we will be having a little more intellectually stimulating discussion when we'll be starting with the Greek historiography. So I'm stopping here for today. So far, if you are having any question, any doubt, you can ask me.